There are 298 prisoners on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 9 of the series. Rodney Lowe, 53 years old, 32 years on death row. Donna Burnell, the victim, was a clerk at an Indian River County New-Pack convenience store. She was shot 3 times with a .32 caliber handgun on the morning of July 3, 1990, by a man who had just walked into the store. Miss Burnell was shot in the face, head, and chest, and when she was being transported to the hospital, she passed away. Without collecting any cash from the shop, the man fled the scene. Because Rodney Lowe's fingerprints were discovered at the scene and his car was observed leaving the convenience store's parking lot, the police were able to connect him to the incident. The following week, they brought him in for interrogation. Lowe made a statement that connected him to the murder after having a brief talk with his girlfriend. He was detained after making this admission. Stephen Stein, 55 years old, 32 years on death row. The murders of Dennis Saunders and Bobby Hood led to the conviction of Stephen Stein. Dennis Saunders and Bobby Hood, shift supervisor at the Pizza Hut on Edgewood Avenue, were shot and killed there on January 20, 1991. Hood was shot 5 times while Saunders was shot 4 times. Additionally, $980 was taken from the diner. The following day, Saunders and Hood's bodies were discovered in the Pizza Hut's men's restroom. A little after 11 p.m., an employee named Ronald Burroughs had left the establishment. He claimed that when he departed, there were still 2 clients inside. The co-defendant, Mark Christmas, and Stephen Stein were the customers, according to Burroughs. Stein worked for Pizza Hut and Christmas had previously worked there. Christmas' fingerprint was also discovered by the police on the unpaid guest check. Stein and Christmas's roommate Kelly White testified that the two had discussed planning a robbery at a Pizza Hut. Stein and Christmas claimed they were going to see Christmas' father about selling the weapon when they left the apartment on January 20, 1991 at around 9:30 p.m. However, Christmas's father stated that neither Stein nor Christmas had visited him that evening. By 11:45 p.m., Stein and Christmas had returned home. Stein provided a statement to the police after being detained. He declared his want to discuss the crime and waived his rights. He acknowledged participating in the crime and claimed that things had gone bad. He never acknowledged shooting Hood or Saunders. Emmanuel Johnson, 60 years old, 32 years on death row. On October 4, 1988, the body of Iris White, 73 years old, was found by the police. The victim was discovered naked below the waist. She had received 24 stab wounds and the back of her head had sustained brutal damage. Her heart and lungs were both cut by the fatal stabbings. Additionally, there were non-fatal injuries close to the genitalia. Defense-related injuries were evident on White's physique. Police found a cut-open screen and an open living room window at the crime site. On the windowsill, Emmanuel Johnson's fingerprints were discovered. There were also 2 hairs found at the scene. Under a microscope, these hairs exhibited the same traits as Johnson's, but a specialist testified that a perfect match could not be made. Johnson had been employed by White to work on her yard several years prior to the murder. A questioning of Johnson took place on October 12, 1988. The cops were able to record a confession during this conversation. Johnson admitted that he visited White's home to talk about lawn care in this confession. Johnson grabbed White as soon as she opened the door and choked her till she passed out. He then repeatedly stabbed White. He locked himself out of the house and fled through the front door. Once he was locked out, he realized he had forgotten to take White's wallet. He cut the screen and slipped inside the house through the living room window after about 20 minutes. Johnson claimed to have thrown away the wallet at a specific location. The wallet was discovered by a road surveyor in the same spot where Johnson claimed to have left it. Billy Kries, 51 years old, 32 years on death row. Billy Leon Kries was found guilty of murdering Fort Pierce police officer Danny Parrish on January 18, 1991, as well as armed robbery. Kries was found to be traveling the wrong way down a one-way street by Officer Danny Parrish. Parrish stopped Kries after radioing the car's license plate number. Kries supplied Parrish a number of aliases that did not correspond to the history on his driver's license because he did not have his own. Then Kries was told to get out of the car and put his hands on the roof. A fight started when Parrish tried to handcuff Kries. Kries fired 14 shots after snatching Parrish's gun. Parrish was hit by 13 bullets, 9 of which entered his body and 4 of which entered his bulletproof vest. A neighboring cab driver heard the gunfire and witnessed a dark blue car driven away from the site by a black man and woman. The cab driver then used Parrish's radio to make a help request. Emergency services took Parrish to the hospital, where he succumbed to his gunshot wounds. A 1979 dark blue Monte Carlo driven by a black male was the subject of a Be on the Lookout alert. When the police looked up the license plate number Parrish had requested prior to the traffic stop, they found that it was registered to a Fort Pierce home, which is where Kries was taken into custody. Kries gave up his right to a Miranda warning and admitted to shooting Parrish while they were arguing. During the trial, a friend of Kries's stated in testimony that he shot Officer Parrish because his probation was suspended and the police was looking for him already. Anthony Mungen, 57 years old, 30 years on death row. Anthony Mungen was found guilty of first-degree murder and given the death penalty on January 28, 1993. Betty Jean Woods, a clerk at a convenience store in Jacksonville, was shot in the head on September 16, 1990, and she passed away 4 days later. Since there were no witnesses to the shooting, a customer who entered the convenience shop immediately after the shooting remembered seeing a man running out of the business with a paper bag. The injured employee was found by the customer, who later recognized Mungen as the man leaving the business. A store manager noticed a $59 difference from the register after the incident. A .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol, bullets, and Mungen's Georgia driver's license were discovered during a police search of his home on September 18, 1990, leading to his arrest in Kingsland, Georgia. The bullet recovered from Woods was examined, and it was established that it had been shot from the .25 caliber weapon found at Mungen's house. Chadwick Willis, 56 years old, 32 years on death row. Marlis Sather came home from work on her lunch break on the afternoon of September 5, 1990, only to find Chadwick Willis breaking into her house. When Sather entered the house, Willis hit her many times in the head with a blunt weapon hard enough to fracture and displace a portion of her skull. Willis used wire and duct tape to bind her hands and ankles. Then, in an effort to strangle her, he tied a telephone cord tightly around her neck. Willis drenched Sather in gasoline and lit her ablaze after this failed to work. According to the medical examiner's reports, Sather's death was caused by smoke inhalation. After receiving a call from her work informing the family that Sather had to return from her lunch break, Sather's son-in-law went over to the house and found her body. Antonio Melton, 51 years old, 31 years on death row. On January 23, 1991, Antonio LeBaron Melton and his pal Pendleton Lewis entered Georgia Carter's pawn shop in Pensacola. He pretended to be interested in pawning a jewelry, claims Lewis, who was given immunity by the state to testify against Melton. Melton claimed that Carter and Lewis were discussing the necklace when he put on surgical gloves and reached for a ring. When Carter noticed this, he reached for one of his guns. Melton drew his own revolver while Lewis grabbed Carter's hands. Carter's gun was subsequently taken by Melton. According to Melton, Carter rushed him before falling and hitting his head. Melton then ordered Carter to stop moving, but Carter grabbed for the gun in Melton's hand. Carter was fatally shot in the head during the two's fight for the weapon. The one undeniable truth that remains despite the different accounts is that Melton was the one who fired the shot that eventually killed Carter. Ernest Suggs, 68 years old, 31 years on death row. Suggs was found guilty of murdering Pauline Casey and given the death penalty. Pauline Casey was employed at Walton County's Teddy Bear Bar. The bar was discovered to be unlocked and to be missing money on August 6, 1990. In addition, Casey's car, handbag, and keys were discovered at the establishment, but the victim was not there. Casey's neighbor, Ray Hamilton, told the police that as he left, Casey and the client he didn't identify were playing pool. Police were alerted to the situation and searched for the man and his car that fit Hamilton's description. Based on the description of the vehicle, Ernest Suggs was stopped. Suggs gave officers permission to search his house and car. They discovered $170 in little banknotes, Casey's hand and fingerprints on Suggs' shirt, and blood that matched the victim's blood in his car. The cops also discovered a bar key and a beer cup that resembled those from the Teddy Bear Bar in the harbor behind Suggs's house. The authorities identified Suggs's tire track from his car with those discovered on a nearby dirt road. Police searched this area, and not far from the road where the tire tracks were discovered, they also discovered Casey's body. She had 2 stab wounds to the neck and 1 to the back. Suggs claimed that he had been set up to commit Casey's murder. Ronnie Johnson, 56 years old, 32 years on death row. Around 9 p.m. on March 11, 1989, Tequila Larkins, the business owner of the Sparkle City Laundromat in Perrine, Florida, closed the establishment's entrance. Along with Miss Larkins, customers Jerry Briggs, Valerie Briggs, Eric Beetle, and Walter Hills remained inside the laundromat. Soon after, Ronnie Johnson knocked on the door and requested a change. Johnson barged in as Miss Larkins opened the door, argued with Miss Larkins, and then started fighting with her physically. Johnson took a gun and shot Miss Larkins after dealing her multiple punches to the face. On April 2, 1989, Johnson admitted to the crime, but he later tried to have the confession suppressed. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.